opportunity to show how good you are. It's an update. Well, Commissioner Longline will be here shortly. We will go ahead and get started so that we can be on time at 4 o'clock.
I don't have a whole lot to say other than to turn it over to Martha Tasker. This is an ongoing topic of conversation and an update in terms of status and cost estimates at this point, so as it relates to the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you, Mike, and Mayor and Commissioners. Am I on? I can't tell.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
It's in my ears.
I may need to be closer there. In the packet that I provided you, I provided a couple of staff reports, and one dates back to when we developed the basis of design report for this project, and the other is the agreement for the basis of design report to take us to 90% guaranteed maximum price. A good majority of you lived through those documents, but a couple of the commissioners are new, so I provided that for just to give a little update on the project. And I'll probably go through my presentation and then see if you have any questions for the presentation or any of those staff reports to try to help catch you up, because it's truly a lot of information to try to understand. And again, my name's Martha Tasker, and I'm the Director of Utilities. And with me, I have Mark Peterson. He's an electrical engineer in our department and spends a lot of time at our water and wastewater plants dealing with those. And then online, I believe we'll have some staff from HDR and also from Overland Contracting that could answer questions at some point in time if that gets to be the case. So hopefully we're prepared to walk you through this. And my assistant there is going to flip slides for me because we could not make this work. So for my agenda today, I plan to tell you a little bit about our existing wastewater treatment plant. It's located out on the northeast side of the city, and this is an aerial photo of it. If you went out on North Street, went north on Marymount, up over the railroad tracks, took a quick right, you'd be at the wastewater treatment plant, and the influent comes into our plant down in the center. It's treated through the plant, makes a circle, goes out the backside of the plant, and then discharges into the Smoky Hill River. So there's about 7 acres of facilities out there at this time. And I'll talk a little bit about a feasibility study we did back in 2016 to try to get an idea of what this project might cost to meet our new 2020 NPDES permit. And NPDES stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Permit. It's a mouthful to say, so I'm going to stick with NPDES, so hopefully that's all right. We're using the progressive design build on this project, which we used on our South Water treatment plant that we just completed. And it's what it does is allows our staff to have a little more input into the cost of the project and to make decisions about certain materials and equipment and products that they may not cost the least amount up front, but when you consider the operation and maintenance costs, then they make more sense down the road. Or we have the availability of contractors or equipment salespeople to help us do maintenance on those. So that helps us. I'm going to talk a little bit about our loan agreement we have with the state that we're going to finance this project. In the document I provided, we talked about BODR, that's Basis of Design Report. And that document was a requirement through our Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And basically, it's our roadmap. We developed that document and then had KDHE, or the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, review it and approve it. And basically, it's guiding us to go down the rest of our project. And then following that, we just recently wrapped up 60% design, which is also a requirement from KDHE. And that's turned in for their review. And again, we've been providing them information at least every 2 weeks or once a month. So we're trying to stay very close in contact with them so they know how things are working out. Our topic for today is really about construction cost increases, and I doubt if I need to go into much detail on what that means if you're watching any news or any of the information on the market. We're seeing pipe and materials be 300%. And sometimes that's a guess. We're talking today about 12-inch pipe that used to be $20 a foot. Now it's about $80 a foot. And the real issue is you don't know when you'll get it, if you even want to purchase it. So with a project like this with a lot of pipe and equipment, the delivery times and that are sometimes quite a guess for us. And then with us being over cost some, we've been all the way through the project, we've been looking what we call value engineering, is try to look at our design and think about, is there something we could do better? Is there any efficiencies here? So the contractor, our owner's rep and staff have all been thinking through those, and we've had a few ideas. And we've also asked the KDHE staff, when they review our 60% documents, if they see something that they've seen done at another facility that might be cost favorable to, feel free to bring that up with us. We'll talk about project schedule, and finally, we'll talk about how might we finance this additional cost if it holds true till we get to the 90% document. I'm going to give you a little bit of age, and this was going to work better with me pushing the buttons because I'm trying to show you the difference of our process as we built our plant. So you can kind of push away, and I'll try to talk as fast as I can to keep up with you. So, we got them all at once, so he's really fast. I'm not that fast, Jacob. So in 1926, we had was the first time a treatment plant was built in the city of Salina. And the pump station that's down here on the end of Ash Street, right by the river, was built at that same time and pumped all the wastewater out to the treatment plant. So that was day one. It's almost 100 years old. We use that structure. 1948, we added some additional treatment basins, clarifiers, and trickling filters for the BOD and retreatment, and then some settling basins. And then the liquid went to the Smoky Hill River. And then all of the solids, they go in a separate treatment process. Okay.
Martha, I don't want to slow you down if you want to keep a fast pace, but history, did we do that in 26? For what reason? Was there government regulation at that time? And in 48, what prompted us to
In
treat our water?
1926, all of the wastewater was just being discharged into the Smoky Hill River. And some of the citizens in the area and the government regulations started to get to where that just was not favorable. And so everything in Salina discharged into the channel there, which at that time was a lot of residential area around there. So it's back in the very beginning. So I don't know if that hits your question. A combination of the public health and the government regulations. The regulations there were not nearly what they are today as far as treatment. See, there we took that flow and we took it clear out to the northeast side of the city. Then we put it back in the river for those living downstream, which is how it works today. There's always somebody that has a wastewater treatment plant upstream of you, but naturally things get treated as they travel through the river and the additional treatment. So just a change.
And then get indoor plumbing, Carl? What year did you get indoor plumbing?
I couldn't tell you that. I always had it. It's a benefit I've never not enjoyed.
And then
Commissioner Ryan, we're getting signals. We need you to point your mic down so they can pick you up on that sound
Oh,
system.
okay, sorry about that.
1961 added very similar basins and additional solids. This is wastewater collections maintenance building. This is the treatment plants maintenance building. And this is the large treatment plant upgrade we did in 1993. And basically at that time, we added activated sludge basins and some final clarification, UV disinfection, and aeration. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those do for us as we move farther in our presentation. And then we added a belt filter press, which actually takes all of the biosolids from a liquid form and squeezes the water out of it and makes it into a cake that we can beneficially take and use on farmland. Most of the time, we have a contractor that takes that biosolids and as more of a liquid, 3 or 4% solids, and liquidifies it to his land for beneficial use because of the nutrients in it. So that's where the solids go to. And the liquid from the treatment plant, again, goes to the Smoky Hill River. Okay. So we've talked about some of these items, our last major upgrade. To give you a little more information, this is what our activated sludge basins look like. There's 3 of them. They have these pie-shaped diffusers in the bottom. They're about 20 foot deep. The air is added in there to create the right, I'll call it lifestyle for the microbiology so they can do their job, treat the waste. That's just a third basin that's empty. Our capacity of our treatment plant is 7.25 MGD. It was constructed and really designed and built when the Air Force Base was really at full force and our population was 60,000 or so. So it was built for that. Today, we treat about 3.75 MGD, or about 50% of the flow. And if you took a read through some of the documents, it talks about how we can expand the plant from this point up to the 7.25 MGD without spending all the money in 1 year. We can wait until the demand and the need there is to expand. Then we have, these are ultraviolet light bulbs. We have about 800 of those, and they disinfect the wastewater before it goes to the stream. And that's kind of the human contact part of what all the work we do. Most everything else we do out there is for the environment and the ecosystem to take care of that. This is kind of a unique structure. It adds air back into the wastewater before it goes to the river for the aquatic life, because a lot of our treatment process removes some of the oxygen. So we're placing the air back in there for that. You might say, why is nutrient removal important? I'm sure you've all heard of the dead zone down at the ocean where the nitrogen, phosphorus, and such finds its way into there. You grow an algae bloom, harmful for aquatic life, harmful for us if it's in a lake and in our drinking water system. So all those nutrients make a fine place for that to grow. So that's what we're removing so we can solve that problem. So most of that's aquatic system. The UV is for the human contact part of this. The wastewater plant project has been talked about since back in 2005. We get our wastewater permits in 5-year increments. So in 2005, we were asked to do a study to look and see what it would take to meet nutrient removal at our plant. 2010 permit, they asked us to monitor. 2015, they kind of set some target goals for us to start thinking about what we were going to need to meet. And then as we got to our 2015, they set hard, or 2020, they set hard numbers for us. So upgrading the wastewater plant isn't just new news. It's been talked about, and we've talked about our rates for many a times. The water treatment plant kind of stepped ahead of this process because the city of Salina was drought prone when we had the river go dry. Basically, without the surface water in Canopolis Lake, we don't have enough water to meet our demands in the summertime. So KDHE had kind of encouraged us that maybe dealing with our water supply issue for a community of our size was as important as this wastewater project. So we flip-flopped and did water plant. Now we're working on the wastewater plant. But we did this feasibility study in 2017. It was completed by HDR. And what we looked at was just kind of some very conventional ways that we can meet biological nutrient removal. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but we looked at activated sludge, with some basins on the backside. We looked at a fixed film that's you place inside the basins. We looked at a membrane process, but all different ways that we could meet the goal of doing this to try to come up with costs. At the end of the day, we determined to meet our permit that the cost for nutrient removal or nitrogen and phosphorus to meet our permit was roughly $27 million, and we had about $5 million of equipment replacement. With the plant being 30 years old, that's kind of the end of its useful life for a lot of the equipment out there. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is really what our 2020 NPDES requires us to do as far as nitrogen and phosphorus. Some of the good news on here is some of ours are annual average goals, so that means it's not so hard at each month. You average it over the whole 12 months and gives us a little freedom in, what our numbers can be from month to month. And so just things that we have to meet every day. And they also had a requirement for the ammonia to become much more stringent. These were 2015. You see 10 over here. You see these numbers get a lot lower in the summer. These are daily maxes, and then we have a monthly average. And in all cases, the numbers are much more stringent, which requires our staff to work very hard to meet those numbers. There's not a lot of leeway there. Okay, next slide. A little bit about the progressive design build. As I mentioned, we use this for our water treatment plant project. In December of 2019, we went to the City Commission and were authorized to use that process and also authorized to negotiate with HDR owner's representatives agreement. HDR acts as our owner's rep. As far as our staff, we don't have all of the different disciplines from the structural to the mechanical to HVAC to look at all of the drawings and the plans. So they provide us that input and provide process knowledge. So they were our owner's rep on the water plant. They're also that on the wastewater plant. They act as an extension of our staff. Next slide, please. We went through, you probably noticed in the staff report, a fairly competitive process to select our design build team. We had two that we shortlisted. One was Black & Veatch in cooperation with Walters & Morgan. Walters & Morgan was a contractor that constructed the plant in 1990, so they have the big upgrade. They have a lot of experience with that part of the project. That's where a lot of our work will occur this time, is in the BNR basins. And Burns & McDonnell and CAS provided the South Water Treatment Plant. And I don't know, Mark might hit me for saying this, but both of us worked on that project in 1990 in the design and the construction and startup. Walters & Morgan has about 5 people that are still working for their company. So we have a little bit of institutional knowledge to kind of take us back and help us with the project. Jacob. So the City Commission agreed to, our consensus was to hire Black & Veatch with Overland Contracting Incorporated. With Walters & Morgan, we developed the agreement with Overland Contracting. We're following the Design Build Institute standard agreement documents. And so at that time, we negotiated a contract with them to do phase 1. We wanted to determine what are we really going to build before we put together a fee in dollars for the complete 90% design. And then ultimately, once we get to the guaranteed maximum price at the 90% design, we will move into a complete detailed design, construct the project, and then have some post follow-up on the project. Next slide, please. The state of Kansas has what they call low-interest loans. We looked at the nutrient removal project, and obviously you get on the list for loans in advance of preparing the basis of design report or others. And we executed our loan for $31.5 million, which left us about $4.5 million for engineering and a little bit of inflation. And we got that loan at 1.3% for 20 years. So that's a wonderful rate, may even look better here in the next few months. So that's where that shakes out. Next slide, please. This is, these numbers in this column were provided in that second staff report, and there was kind of an explanation of what took us to this increase in dollars. And so really what we're talking about this time is to try to get from this basis of design report to where we're at on this 60% design. As you look down through there, the engineering numbers, the owner's rep, those dollars are staying the same and the loan's staying the same. But what you see change is these construction dollars. So from this figure to this figure, it's about $3.3 million. Next slide, please. So when we look at the design change, basically there's about a half dozen items that came up during the design. One had to do with a different type of mixing. We were using submersible mixers, but that was the first concept. As we looked, we determined their life expectancy is kind of short and takes a lot of maintenance to pull them and deal with them, so we thought that maybe wasn't our best interest. We moved into a compressed air system, and we're still evaluating one other system to try to look for the most cost favorable, but at the end of the day, it had a little higher cost of roughly, I don't know, around $300,000, added some baffle walls and some HVAC and some other modifications, but with dollars to today, what we think the costs are today, that was a little over $800,000, but the biggest issue has to do with the anticipated market escalation, and it's everything from piping to concrete to rebar, and also the duration of the project is longer now based on delivery times, because they've been, checking with the manufacturers on what's the expected time for pipe. It used to be you could do a bid and they'd hold your price for 60 days. In fact, that's what our specs say. Right now, if you ordered stainless steel pipe, which we have some, they might tell you they'll hold that for a day. It's just the time demand that you have to turn your, put your dollars in for what your materials in for what you need is one thing, and then the real side issue is when they might get it to you. The delivery times are very, very stretched out. We used to always say, if you want to get some equipment, by the time you do shop drawings and get some of it, it's 6 months or so on. Now things are drug out to a year plus, and it's still kind of hard to decide whether we'll really get all of that or not. So all of that delay and some of the products costing 2 to 3 times is driving this cost up. So we have some that's been factored into the basis of design report, and now we're trying to bring it up to current dollars. But I guess the real answer is we won't know till we take their final design, our materials, and the equipment we've selected out to the market and get costs. And unless somebody has a really good crystal ball, we feel like we're at a little bit of mercy. But for me, I didn't want to wait till 90% and bring this all to you and say, well, I need another 6 or 7 million. I thought I should let you know kind of how things are shaking out right now. And the guaranteed maximum prices we're looking at in September. Next slide, please. So we have one item that we added into the project, and as we value engineered our way through it and back and forth, it's what's surface wasting off of our basins. It's about $1 million. And we're fairly confident that that we're able to leave that out and be able to deal with it differently in how we do our maintenance on a day-to-day basis in our basins. The other is a fourth final clarifier that we had placed in. It's about $2 million. We're still looking through the process. KDHE has fairly specific design standards for every structure or process that you build. And so we've given them this list about the fourth clarifier, and HDR has been reviewing all of the wastewater models that Black & Veatch has prepared to really see if our effluent or if our influent quality into our basin is X, what will we get out at the backside? So, but for me to look through that model. It's pretty massive, but HDR's been doing a real good job of staying after that. So we have about $3 million that's possibly could be value engineered out. But again, the clarifier will have to make it through the rest of the work that we're doing, and KDHE would have to buy off on our final decision there of where we're headed. Next slide, please. This is basically the schedule that we're looking at. Supposed to have a guaranteed maximum price to HDR and city staff in August, with the intent of bringing that back to the city commission in September with our contract negotiated and ready to go. Start construction about that same time. We're looking at about November of 2024 for substantial completion, which means we can use it for our intended purpose, and then final completions in February of 2025. Going back to our permit, the date that was identified in it was to meet all of the permit requirements by December 31st, 2024. And if you look down here under the NPDES permit, the construction sequence that's been developed allows us to meet phosphorus removal in October and nitrogen in February of 2024, which is well ahead of the December 31st, 2024 date. So KDHE is pleased with this schedule and how that's all been put together, and we've reviewed this with them, so I think from a standpoint of schedule, they're happy with us.
I know you talked about potential delays in the delivery of piping and stuff. What happens if that delays us? Are there fines or penalties that would happen, or?
Well, as a side note, obviously well ahead of this, we've talked, Mark and I have had conversations with the KDHE staff about that very same thing, and a little bit about risk as to, is there a point in time to where you just can't afford to build a project because of these odd costs and things? How would that shake out? And unofficially, in verbal conversations, they could add a year to our project without any real fines or anything against us. They just give us a new, I think they called it schedule of compliance. Is that the right words? Do you remember, Mark?
Adjusted schedule.
So we already kind of crossed that bridge a while back because of the very same concern, what happens, and I think that was, some of our discussions were prior to the situation in Russia that I'm sure is not going to help our cause, at least for the short term. So we spent a lot of time talking with KDHE to make sure we don't. I mean, they're our ultimate regulator.
Yeah, communication, as long as we keep communicating to them where we're at, I think they'll
Yeah,
work with us.
they've been very appreciative, and every time we do a progress meeting with a slide deck every 2 weeks, we send that slide deck to KDHE, trying to be as transparent as we can. We, look at them as a valuable asset to our review and project, not that they're the regulator with the big stick. They've been very easy to work with and very thoughtful about the dollars and the costs. They understand at some point in time you just got to decide, can we afford to do this, or what's our option? So hopefully that answered your question. The next slide, Jacob. One item I didn't put on here was we did in the ARPA concept put down to ask, because the cost that the plant is increased has basically had a lot to do with COVID and the supply chain and the whole issue. So in talking with Jacob, I gave him the dollar figure that was a change for our treatment plant and for our equipment. And Jacob kindly put those numbers in as far as something we asked for dollars for. Their ideas. And if I say something wrong, Jacob, you straighten me out, because I'm going by what I think I know and what I don't know. But we did ask for those dollars, but I'm guessing that us and every other city that has a real big project in the mill is having the same thing and asking for dollars. So we did, and I don't know if we'll get our lottery ticket punched that day or not, but we did ask for it. But there's also the reality of what might we be able to do in the real world. So what we've done is we've already spoke with KDHE about could we have an additional $6 million, which is the difference between our loan and where we're projected today. I don't know what that's going to be in September, but for that. And our current interest rate is 1.3%, and they'll hold to that rate. And working with Debbie, we're looking at an annual payment of about $343,000. That would affect the rates about 1.5%, but that's only on the usage. We didn't factor in anything for the monthly charges that we include. So it's not a straight number. That's the best we could come up with to try to give you an idea of how it fits together. And then option 2 was revenue bonds. Of course, that's at an interest rate Debbie feels is about 3%. And $400,000 annual payment, or an increase of about 2% in that, the usage portion of the bill. Option 3, we currently have system enhancements that include about $2 million a year in just overall system enhancements, about $500,000 in vehicles and equipment, some on buildings and facilities. And water mains in our operating budget is about $2 million a year. So we could choose to postpone some of that work and ultimately get to our $6 million that we'd be short. Option 4, I think they probably start with the best option and work their way down, would be to use part of our capital reserve fund, but really we keep that fund for some type of economic development or other project, or could be our share of the base grants or whatever that comes out if we have portions of those. So I don't know that that's a great option, but I put it on there, and I called it number 4, but it'd be the last one in my book. And so that's kind of where to give you some idea how we might be able to fund this as we go forward. And my last slide is questions. And boy, did I go through that kind of fast.
At what point would we need to make a decision on how we were to finance this?
I think when we we have the guaranteed maximum price, and we're negotiating the contract with Overland Contracting, which right now we're proposing to be in September, that we would need to know how we're going to pay the bill. And if we would choose to increase the loan with KDHE, we'd go back through the documents of where we provide all of our current debt and our rate analysis, and they'd review it to determine whether it was affordable for us and so on.
And did you say we've already been approved for the $6 million at 1.3%?
Yes, they said we could have those dollars if we wanted them, and they're familiar with where we're at. But as a part of the process, we would have to complete a look at our current debt, our current projects. But in a nutshell, the answer would be yes, but paperwork.
I think it would be beneficial to, look to
that in.
staff to go ahead and complete that paperwork at a 1.3% based on the direction things are headed, knowing that 6 million, if we decided to go some other ways and take that 6 million to 4 million or whatever, we'd be able to do that. 6 million would be the maximum that we would ask for.
And with KDHE, if we, as you may remember on some of our other water main projects, or we've not used all of our dollars, so if we don't use it, the final loan is just set to
It's
match
what you
whatever
use, right.
dollars we use
Yeah,
in that time frame. So you're kind of the best
I'd
of
have to
both
look at my other
worlds there.
commissioners, but I think we'd want to go ahead and
Yeah, I'd
and
concur it's sooner than later.
for,
Basically, you want to lock in the interest rate now,
Yeah.
given the times.
Yeah.
Understood.
yeah.
Well, it appears you have a lot of options for borrowing money. What is your plan to pay it back?
Through the water and sewer rate, yearly rates is the option we use, and that's where
So
that
it'll probably be an increase in
that-
sewage rates?
increase in the water and sewage rates, because it's a combined rate. On the water side, when we looked at it, in our water rates, we have one category that's a monthly cost that covers a lot of the administrative and other issues, and a meter cost. And then there's actually a consumption cost that's based on how many gallons you use. And when Debbie looked at this, it was mainly, we just looked at the consumption portion. We didn't make any adjustments to the monthly costs, so, through the rates.
And it looks like the KDHE loan rate, the estimate is a 1.5% increase, where if we issued revenue bonds, that'd be a 2% increase.
Yeah,
So,
and only on the consumption portion. It's a little confusing because we have separate dollars for the meter cost and the administrative costs. You know, the water and the sewer each have a monthly charge. Then on top of that, there's a charge for the volume of consumption you have.
Yeah,
So it's
I guess my
consumption that
concern
will
is
go up.
we already have the water rates going up to pay for the South Water Plant. So we'll be going up additionally.
Yes, as we get through, that's our method, is to use that, or to use some, as we mentioned, to use some of our other dollars that are already factored in and postponed jobs.
right, the options 3 and 4 represent ways to pay for it without debt financing, without a rate increase, but then
Yeah.
they have other impacts on
Yeah.
operations.
What's the,
I wouldn't be in favor of option 3 because with all the water line breaks we've had,
161 in
yeah.
last year, or 5, I can't
Water mains
remember. I
need to be
just looked at it.
replaced.
They do. So,
what's the amortization time on the state program versus the revenue bonds? Because it's, you would think the payment would be a little bit different on that.
state is 20 years. I'm going to give that to Debbie. Would you please help
And,
me out with that?
and has that clock started in light of when they issued that?
Hasn't started yet on the
Okay.
wastewater plant.
They're both 20 years currently, but I have heard that the state revolving loan fund, you could extend to 30 years, but we've never done that. We haven't looked into that, so there is a possibility to do that. And you could do that for either revenue bonds but we've looked at 20 years for both of them when we've looked at these calculations.
So, I agree with you, Commissioner, about if there's anything in my current job position that I catch the most discussion from the public is water mains and replacing those. When we have the 170 or 80 miles of those old cast iron pipes that tend to try to grow shut and create the red rusty water, that is what gives the customers the most heartburn in my entire job here since the day I started. So, and I can't blame them. So to me, not doing the water mains is, I agree, is not a good option, but I just had to lay out what the choices are. They all have their pros and cons.
And the problem's industry-wide. Our approach, when we were able to find a way to actually commit these kind of dollar amounts annually, was pretty progressive. But it's a question whether we can maintain it.
We do definitely I get lots of calls from other communities about, how are you doing that? How are you sending your plans in? And we're pretty efficient how we do that. We do the plans in-house so that we don't spend a lot of dollars on design, that we can actually have those dollars go into additional feet of pipe. And replacing the 6-inch water main used to be about $100 a foot. I'm afraid to find out what it is now. It was creeping up to about 120, and with the pipe being, the larger share, and the other item is labor. It's very, very difficult right now to find labor. We have 2 really good contractors that do a lot of our water main projects, and they fight for the same employees we do. In fact, we steal theirs, they steal ours. It's kind of back and forth, but we don't do each other any favors because we're either short or they're short, and we all have to work together to finish the project. So it's been challenging from that standpoint, but the water mains is personally one of the things that, I get the most gratification from people when theirs finally gets changed. Those that haven't are, I think they all a lot of them have my personal cell phone number and call me when they want to. So sometimes they just want to tell me, just want to make me feel their pain, and I appreciate it. I understand, so.
I'm
It's a tough
curious, what are you replacing that old cast iron with?
PVC. We put in DR14. We use a little heavier pipe, and that way we can use our existing material for the backfill. So some of the projects to date, as we go forward, we may be looking at the lined ductile iron, some of the bids with other contractors and engineers that I've spoke with, they've been seeing a little ductile iron being used, that it's, PVC is, kind of follows the price of fuel and those products, and so right now, I know of a couple projects where they're using the ductile iron pipe, which is in our standard. They could use either or. Ductile iron's usually more favorable for the larger size pipes, because they did not used to make the larger size pipes in the PVC, but now they do. So typically, PVC, I think, is what all of our bids have been to date. Now, that may be changing. So it's a changing environment.
No, thank you. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Well, saying unless.
One
anyone
passing
has
note,
any-
Ms. Tasker mentioned applying for essentially ARPA funds, which we did do. Had a conversation with some of our elected officials recently, last week, and they kind of made a passing comment that there were 4 committees that received applications. I believe it was the early deadline, more of that idea submission format. And one of those committees they recognized would receive probably the bulk of the applications, or at least the higher dollar items. That committee's request totaled $6 billion, and then they made a passing comment that they think that committee probably represented half of the entirety of the request received. So if that's the case, there's $12 billion worth of requests for $730 million worth of funds.
You said 12.
Billion.
I thought that was what you said with the B.
Oops.
That's why I didn't put it on the list, Mike. I'd heard similar.
We'll still keep fighting for it, but just to give you a little bit of perspective of kind of
Don't
response
factor
so
those
far.
dollars into the budget.
And I think Jacob reported previously that there are over 1,000 suggestions, applications, whatever you want to call it, received in that first round.
But you have to ask.
Sure.
Right.
No other, they're going to award it somewhere.
Yeah, gotta ask.
All right, we will meet back at 4 o'clock.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Tasker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, welcome to the regular weekly meeting of the Salina City Commission. This is February 28, 2022. Ask the city clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Here?
Commissioner Linkowitz.
Here.
Commissioner Longbine.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Right, if you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do not have any awards or proclamations, so we will proceed directly to Citizens Forum, which is an opportunity for anyone to come to the podium to discuss anything they want that's not on the agenda, and there's a 3-minute time limit. Got a long agenda, so don't take long to come up there, okay? No one? Or anyone online? No. All right, we will move to public hearings.
Item 5.1, 2022 Special Assessment Projects. 5.1A, conduct public hearing on the 2022 Special Assessment Projects. 5.1B, approve ordinance number 22-11100 on second reading, levying special assessment for improvements.
Mayor Davis, before we get started, I'd like to recuse myself due to a conflict with my current business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. Today's action item stems from the February 7th, 2022 Commission action item where you received the final breakdown for costs of special assessment infrastructure projects that were completed in 2021. These 3 projects were for Magnolia Hills Estates Number 2, Stone Lake Addition Phase 3A, and the Markley Road Trail. This part of the process is that we're going to hold a public hearing which allows for any owner of any of those properties to come forward, not to necessarily discuss a special assessment being put upon their property, but to discuss the cost and how it was allocated to those properties. Once we get this done with this hearing and we pass this resolution, those special assessments will be bond financed. Then we will actually we will send another notice. We've already sent one notice to the property owners when we adopted this resolution on ordinance on first reading. We sent a notice to every property owner within these districts, notifying them that we were having a public hearing today and of what the estimate of the cost on their property would be. Once we adopt this, go through the public hearing, and adopt this on second reading, we will send them another notice, which allows them the opportunity to either pay that special assessment up front to eliminate that 15-year period of payoff with interest, or to let it go ahead and ride, and the city will issue bonds on that and pay those over the course of 15 years on their behalf. If they choose to not pay it up front, then we will levy special assessments against their property each year for 15 years in order to pay that debt back, and that would include interest. If they choose to pay, we will reduce the cost that we issue bonding for, and then we'll use that money to pay off the cost of the projects. So today we have 2 actions, one to conduct a public hearing, and then one to pass ordinance number 22-11100 on second reading. Once we hold the public hearing, you could pass that ordinance on second reading with amendments as you deem appropriate. You could postpone the ordinance to second reading, which would delay our issuance of bonds. And then you could conduct the public hearing and not pass that, which we need to have some further indications from you, a direction on how to fund those projects. I stand for any questions.
Question? None here.
here, Mayor.
So first, we'll have the public hearing.
Okay, I just had one, and I'd asked you this the first time around. For an amount of $133,000, the city's share.
Yep.
Is that an amount large enough that we would be one of the 15-year, or would we just pay our portion?
No, we have chosen to pay that out of sub-CIP gas tax or sales tax dollars. We didn't choose. Some cases, depending on what that amount is, if that amount was much larger, we could finance that, and we would be one of those. We would be paying that portion, but in this case, we did not. We are not financing that.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open the public hearing on the 2022 special assessment projects that have been listed. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? No one online? Well, I will close the public hearing and bring this back to the commissioners if there's any action to be taken.
Mayor, I move the city commission, well, you have conducted the public hearing. I move we pass ordinance number 22-11100 on second reading.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-11100. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hoppick, Commissioner Linkowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Davis.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0, and we can ask Commissioner Hoppick back in. All right. Now have the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of February 14th, 2022. Item 6.2, authorize the city manager to execute a specialty contractor agreement with Caw Valley Engineering, Inc. for Remedial Design Phase 2, surveying support at the former Schilling Air Force Base site. 6.3, authorize the city manager to execute a contract for engineering design services with Wilson and Company, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $464,212 for engineering services for project number 20029 Centennial Road and Arnold Avenue drainage and street improvements. Item 6.4, approve the minutes of February 23, 2022.
Are there any items that a commissioner wishes to remove from the
Yes,
consent agenda?
Mayor Davis, I'd like to remove item 6.2, please.
Right, and I also wanted that one removed for a question. Any other items? Entertain a motion to approve items 6.1, 6.3, and 6.4.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve consent agenda items 6.1, 6.3, and 6.4.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve 6.1, 6.3, and 6.4. Any question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And passes 5-0. And item 6.2, Ms. Tasker.
Okay. And again, I will recuse myself on this item. As you will notice, Caw Valley is subbing out some title work, and my business is currently subbing that, doing the work for them on this. So I will
Okay,
step aside.
thank you. It's a short question. I started having to pull it out and just ask the question, but this is for what's considered specialty contract work. What types of subcontracting work would not be included under the general? Because for some folks, the cost of the contractor's work might seem to be a large amount of money. And they'd say, well, I mean, that's not included.
What we tried to do was to set it up to where we have local contractors that could, or companies that could provide this service locally, that it could be provided from here, local, as opposed to where our contractor is from the Dragon from Minnesota or Olson out of Nebraska. So that it's set up to break those pieces out, not to be encumbered in the larger project. And The main areas we have here is a list of the testing, groundwater testing, and surveying, and we have one left to do, and that's disposal of waste from when we excavate some of the dirt. So the work that's being done away is the more design of the technical aspects for the direct groundwater recirculation, which is a large share of the $70 million budget for the project, and the oversight that Dragan is doing as our consultant.
So from the beginning, then, this would have been planned to have been separated out?
Yes, we planned on separating and estimated about $500,000 for the specialty contractors. The survey, as we started into that work, determined we have a lot of contractors and firms locally that could do that survey work, as opposed to leaving that as a part of Olson's work from Nebraska, which is where it originally was pegged to be done. And we had 3 bidders. One was Caw Valley, one was Wilson and Company, and one was Olson. And by using Caw Valley and competitively bidding that, it was a substantial savings for the project.
So yeah, that approach helps in terms of being able to solicit competitive bids, identify things that might be able to be done locally, and then also contract directly rather than have them be a subcontractor subject to some markup through the general contractor. So our thinking is strategically that represents cost, the opportunity at least, for cost savings.
And it does carry a 10% markup. So if we have a Olson that's doing a sub for Dragan, and they have a markup for a sub working for them, and then Dragan has a markup on that, it's quite costly. So in general terms, we probably saved about $200,000 by doing this competitive bid for the survey work, as opposed to leaving it in the Olson's project. So financially, it was a good move for the community. And it's mainly just to allow our local vendors to have an opportunity to bid, as opposed to some vendor or firm from away using what they're used to, for lack of better terms, who they typically work with.
So this is good news all around.
It really is good
Thank you.
news. It's well over a $200,000 savings for the community.
Thank you. I guess since I did ask, any questions or comments from the public on this? All right, any action to be taken on this by the commission? We need a motion to, I don't know if I should.
Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute a specialty contract agreement with Caw Valley Engineering, Inc. for remodel design Phase 2 surveying support at the former Schilling Air Force Base in the amount not to exceed $164,250,000.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the specialty contract agreement with Caw Valley Engineering, as noted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, and we could ask Commissioner Hoppick. Not sure which side he went out on. All righty, administration, 7.1.
Item 7.1, approve resolution number 22-8025, defining the perimeters for establishing the Workers' Compensation Fund reserve balance goal, establishing a Workers' Compensation Fund management policy, and authorizing the city manager to administer the Workers' Compensation Fund in accordance with the management policy.
Hello there.
Good afternoon, Mayor and
Bishop.
Commissioners. The City of Salina has self-funded our workers' compensation program since 1998. And what that means is, rather than contracting or paying direct premium dollars to an insurance company, we set aside dollars and into an internal fund. And then out of that fund, we pay for any claims, administrative expenses such as fees with our third-party administrator, and our excess work comp coverage out of that to cover all of those expenses. Excess work comp is a type of policy that we are required by the state to carry in order for us to receive a permit to self-insure. And Similar to on the health insurance side, where we have stop-loss coverage, on the excess coverage side, there's limits that give us a ceiling on how much we're going to incur on any given accident or incident. Currently, our coverage that's in place, and actually not only through 2022, but also through May of 2023, that is $500,000 for all of our employees with the exception of sworn police and fire. And we have a carve out for them, meaning a little higher risk assessed, and that's $750,000. Fortunately, over the course of us self-insuring, we have never had an incident or accident reach that level. In February, during a study session, we presented, along with our insurance consultant, Bob Charlesworth, some options and some concepts as far as how do we go about establishing a fund that gives us parameters, a minimum as well as a maximum, just in terms of that fund management, because we haven't had those. Other than a target balance, we have not had any solid guidelines or parameters to which we are looking to manage that, and in terms of making budgetary decisions every year. He provided some information and some different concepts, but when it came back to it, his recommendation was to keep it simple and to look at 1 times our highest self-insured retention, which is, again, kind of that ceiling, our most expensive accident or incident, along with our administrative costs, and on the maximum, twice that. So just in terms of what that means in dollar amounts, we're looking at a range of $860,000 up to $1.5 million. Or at least that's what we're looking at prior to any future years with whatever our self-insured retention maximums and our other administrative expenses are in terms of what it would do to those levels. There's really not a direct fiscal impact. Again, this is more of a policy decision, just getting guidance in terms of what that looks like, in terms of what we do, minimums and maximums. And in the event we would fall below or be above that, this policy allows the city manager or staff to bring that back to you for further direction, to take action to try to get us within that range. The slides that were provided during that study session were attached as well. That gives additional background to what was discussed during that study session. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide any information that I could. But in terms of the recommended action, staff has identified the following options: adopting the resolution 228025 that defines the parameters for establishing the workers' compensation fund reserve balance goal, establishing a work comp fund management policy, and authorizing the city manager to administer the workers' compensation fund in accordance with that management policy, or the alternatives to, alternatively adopt resolution 228025 with amendments recommended by you, postpone consideration, or not adopting resolution 228025 at this time.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh,
I have one. The third-party administrator, it sounds like the plan's working well. The satisfaction, no one wants to come to work and get hurt, but the satisfaction and the level of care and administering through that, are the employees happy, or is it an issue?
Yeah, I haven't received any feedback otherwise. I do believe that, and our third-party administrator is CCMSI. I do believe they've provided solid care. The employees do know that they can either contact HR or that third-party administrator in the event there's any concerns of the care. One service for those claims that tend to be a little more complicated, there is a nurse case manager that can be assigned, and we have found that to be a very useful tool, just to ensure that the employee is not only getting satisfactory care, but also getting things explained and I guess, information being communicated and conveyed about why things are happening and what's been doing.
So I guess my concern is there's someone there helping the employee through the process.
So in terms of the process on the city side alone, we do have a benefits coordinator that is usually our frontline person, and that is a city employee. And then in conjunction with our claims administrators, and I'm trying to think of the exact title of someone other than those that administer the claims, there is a contact person that can be in touch with from the time that the claims start and different things start happening. There is someone both for the city and CCMI that can help employees through that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments from the audience? And no one online. All right, bring this back for any action to be taken.
Mayor, I move we adopt resolution number 228025, defining the parameters for establishing the Workers' Compensation Fund reserve balance goal, establishing a Workers' Compensation Fund management policy, and authorizing the city manager to administer the Workers' Compensation Fund in accordance with the management policy.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 22-8025. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We can move on to 7.2.
Item 7.2, approve resolution number 22-8030, authorizing increases for certain recreation program and rental fees above the threshold allowed by the Parks and Recreation Revenue and Pricing Policy.
Mr. Hammond, hi there.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Director of Parks and Recreation. You may have heard, in January 2013, City Commission approved the Parks and Recreation Revenue and Fee Policy. This policy is in your packet. You may have heard reference to this policy in many other Commission actions. It's often referred to as a cost recovery policy. Cost recovery is a primary key performance indicator for the department. Cost recovery is typically shown in the form of a percentage of revenues collected versus expenses for our programs that we offer and services that we offer to the community. A simple example would be if we collected $100 in revenue for a program and had expenses of $100, that would be 100% cost recovery. The policy organizes Parks and Recreation programming by categories, and each category has a cost recovery goal, and that goal is reflected as a percentage. The intent of the policy is for Parks and Recreation to responsibly use the funds that are allocated from the general fund while maximizing program participation and rentals at an affordable fee to the community. However, also being able to adjust to current economic and market conditions. As the staff report states, the policy allows adjustments of fees and charges under the authority of the city manager with a limitation of no more than 10% increase in 1 year. However, when proposed fees exceed the cost recovery goals or the 10% increase, further authorization is required. The program categories that we have before you today are relating to Kenwood Cove, neighborhood center rentals, and park shelter rentals. There has been a significant difficulty over the past few years in recruiting staff for Kenwood Cove to become willing to be certified lifeguards. Gone are the days where lifeguarding was a coveted, glamorous position. In an ideal situation, Kenwood Cove would have 60 lifeguard staff who have the endurance and the swimming skill to do the job and put them through a 3 to 4 day certification course. Last year, our aquatic supervisor was able to hire and certify 48 lifeguards at the start of the season, with some of them dropping off after the season and stopping work. Lifeguard pay is an important piece of that puzzle in recruiting lifeguards. Currently, the range of pay for a lifeguard one position is $850 to $950 an hour. With this increase in day pass and membership fees, we would be able to start potential lifeguards at a higher rate within the provided pay range to better compete with jobs that people are going to, namely fast food, restaurants, waiter and waitressing, car wash, other facilities in town that are offering a higher wage per hour. Some of the lifeguard rates of pay that we were able to collect recently, some of them weren't very forthcoming with those rates. However, Manhattan is now currently paying $12 an hour for lifeguards, Derby $10, Wichita $9.25, Garden City $12. The second purpose of requesting proposed fee increases for daily fees and for membership rates at Kenwood Cove is the cost of chemicals. The large expense of operating these facilities to treat water. We saw a 40% increase in what we spent last year in chemicals for the same amount of chemical, going from $21,000 to $30,000. Lastly, we're seeking methods to increase our maintenance fund for Kenwood Cove. On a yearly basis, there is a $68,000 capital request and set aside for maintenance in Kenwood Cove. This fund is primarily for large-scale items. For example, we're in the process of replacing 2 pump impellers. Last year, we had the floor and walls resurfaced or recoated on the Lazy River at a cost of $150,000. This was phase 1. We still have 2 phases remaining for that area, for the pool area, for the kiddie pool and lap pool. Some historical day pass data from Kenwood Cove from 2010 to 2011, which we opened in 2010. 2010 and 2011, there was $3 for a youth, $5 for an adult, and $2 for senior. From 2012 to 2017, it was $3.50 for a youth, $5.50 for an adult, and $2.50 for seniors. And from 2018 to last year, it was $4 for youth, $6 for an adult, and $3 for seniors. We do offer bulk purchases of tickets for 50 or more. We would haven't looked at those rates today and don't have those prepared for you today, but we do offer bulk tickets purchased for 50 or more at a reduced rate. In your packet, there's also some comparable day pass data from other facilities. Kenwood Cove memberships, since 2011 for Kenwood Cove, we offered memberships to Kenwood Cove. A group membership, we've been consistent, and that group can be any group. Could be a family group, could be nannies included, babysitters. We decided that apparently in 2011 to call it a group membership. So we're kind of flexible about who we have in that group. The requirements for a group membership, though, are either 1 adult and 4 children, or 2 adults and 3 children. There is the possibility of adding up to 3 additional children onto that group membership for an additional fee. Some historical membership data. Starting in 2011 to 2013, it was $60 for a youth, $100 for an adult, and $180 for a group. From 2014 to 2021, $65 for a youth, $110 for an adult, $195 for a group. And the summer after the pandemic, we did make an adjustment to the adult rate to $95. So last summer, we did charge adults $95 and not $110. We don't have a lot of adult memberships sold, just single adult memberships sold. So we tried to capture more adult memberships. Lifeguard training classes, again, costs have gone up to certify individuals from $30 in 2017 to $42 for the cost of the certification from the American Red Cross. And this proposal increases the price from $125 to $150. Neighborhood center rentals. The proposal would increase the hourly rental rates for Carver Center, Friendship Center from $17 to $22. The proposed increase are directly related to what it costs to maintain those facilities and also to clean them. We do make sure that every reservation, before the reservation, the facility is cleaned and disinfected. Some historical data relating to Neighborhood Centers, Carver Center, Friendship Center. From 2012 to 2017, it was $15.50 an hour, and park shelter rentals were $10 per hour. From 2018 to present, hourly rates for neighborhood rentals were $17 per hour, and park shelters were $11 per hour. In summary, the proposed increases would have a direct impact on offsetting increased expenses for operating Kenwood Cove, park shelters, and neighborhood centers. Staff has identified options for the City Commission's consideration. Approve Resolution 22-8030 to authorize fee increases for these certain recreation programs. Option 2, approve Resolution 22-8030 with amendments as the City Commission deems appropriate. 3, postpone consideration of Resolution 22-8030. And 4, lastly, 4, vote to deny Resolution 22-8030, resulting in fees staying the same. Staff recommends number 1, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Question?
Yeah, I had a couple here. What is the senior age? Just curious.
62 and over.
62 and up?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And one thing I wanted to add to that, we did not start offering a senior membership until 2019. There was a handful of people who requested a senior membership. Prior to that, we had never offered a senior membership.
Okay.
And we priced it the same as the youth membership.
And, you know, it just seems like everything we hear, everything's going up. And is there any scholarships or assistance for low-income?
We have not had a scholarship funded for Kenwood Cove for some time. There have been organizations, companies in town that had funded a scholarship for day pass sales, to fund day passes. The last one we received was from the Salvation Army. That was in 2019, and we did distribute that appropriately.
Okay. It might be something to entertain.
Jacob, is it possible to put the pyramid in this presentation up on the on the screen? If not, I can just talk about it, but on page 2 on the blue sheet, well, you are the miracle worker, thank you. Where does the pool fit, or Kenwood Cove fit in this period? I'm guessing it's either
Right.
community benefit or community individual, but
It fits under the individual/community benefit, and that'd be the 50 to the 100% range.
all right, because, and I can understand, even if we're not covering all the expenses, if certain basic expenses and chemicals and stuff go up, and lifeguard fees, I didn't realize they worked as inexpensively as they do. Certain fees have to go up, but I was also wondering about what do we do if there are people who just can't afford it? If it was down near at the very bottom of this pyramid, I would certainly expect that we have some subsidy program, and I don't know how you'd qualify folks, but that may be certainly something to,
When you say for the community benefit,
yeah, because this is the only pool we have that's open.
Correct. We have spray grounds, but this is the only
But-
pool.
Yeah,
and that would be part of that community benefit as well, just like a special event would, where there is no charge to enter. For example, the mayor's Christmas party or Halloween, there's no charge to enter. We cover all the expenses, so that would be a cost recovery that would be at that community benefit level.
right, but nothing where a child whose family just truly does not have the money would qualify for a,
We do have a
Very
scholarship program
Sure.
that was funded by Schwann's.
is
We have.
it's still active? Is it still active?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Commissioner, or yes, Mayor, sorry. Yes, we
I
have.
answered anything, and it doesn't matter. Okay.
We were given a scholarship from Schwann's a few years back. It was in the $10,000 to $12,000 range, and we have $3,800 left. It was for the specific purpose of youth athletics and activities. So it gets used for soccer, baseball, softball, swim lessons, gymnastics.
So we need to start soliciting some contributions to that fund then.
If it's helpful, I think the cost recovery pyramid is targeted at programs or offerings rather than people and their individual circumstance. The scholarship is the opportunity to help more directly based on individual circumstances.
I do like the theory behind the pyramid. It's a nice way to look at it. And for the lifeguard training, considering what they make an hour, is this lifeguard training just for our lifeguards, or are we training lifeguards for anybody who wants to get training?
That would be the fee, $100 to $150, or currently $125, is someone who is a public offering for our staff. If they've committed to us to be a lifeguard, we would not charge them a fee.
That was the question I was
It's part of our
gonna ask.
recruiting effort to get lifeguards. If they did pay for it ahead of time, then they came to us, we reimburse their cost at the end of the summer.
Okay.
And there's also some consideration made, we talked about it today, matter of fact, that we can give them half their money back at the half of the season and the remainder at the, so we get a little bit of, but we do get people that come from other communities that want to certify at our facility, so, and that's the charge for that program.
The training is specific to our pool. There's not a common certification that they would
There are-
necessarily come into your program and then take somewhere else, or maybe other communities
We
accept
offer
our
American
training.
Red Cross swimming lessons and lifeguard training, and that's what we use to certify our lifeguards. And that's what our staff, that's what our aquatic supervisor is trained as an instructor to teach. So that's the only program. There are other lifeguarding agencies out there.
But correct me if I'm wrong, it's very possible that they could get American Red Cross certification from us, and then someone else would find that acceptable and
Right.
meeting their standards.
And if they have that already, they can come into our system, or you do
Yes. That's
additional
ideal.
training.
Doesn't happen very often, but that would be ideal.
Do you have additional training program for, it's not just a plain pool, there's a lot going on there. Do you train people on specific areas?
There's the 3 to 4 day course is typically 25 to 28 hours. Incorporated with that is the basic level requirements for the American Red Cross, CPR, first aid, using an AED, and obviously life-saving skills. And then any lifeguard that wishes to continue being a lifeguard, they have to participate in 4 hours of training each month to continue
I
those
guess
skills.
what I'm meaning is that the individual rides, so to speak, do they get trained on the individual areas of the park?
Oh, during like a staff orientation, so we have someone new, we just certified them, we hired them.
Yeah.
Yeah, leading up to the opening day of Kenwood Cove, which is typically Memorial Day weekend. We have an orientation for each of those different groups, whether it be a lifeguard or a cashier. And we go over zone coverage, what it takes to lifeguard this area, what are you looking for, how do you properly scan that area. So there's about 16 hours of training that goes into, and that's just pre-service training, I would call it,
Yeah.
just to leading up
Okay,
to
good.
putting someone in a
Yeah.
chair.
I was hoping there was more training just than
Oh, yeah,
lifeguard.
it's kind of part and parcel with being a lifeguard.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, comments from the public?
Rosemary Meyer from Salina, Kansas. I don't know, maybe in your packet he has the amount of rate increase he's asking for, but it doesn't show what type of a rate increase he's asking for.
On, this is.
Yeah, in the resolution, there's a before and an after for each
Yes.
category.
You know what? It's actually in the resolution. It's not in the blue pages. They were been, the white pages would have been
Oh.
distributed.
There's also an attachment, a spreadsheet.
Was that with, And that would have had to have been reviewed online then before coming to the meeting. I mean, that's not in what was handed out here.
It was part of the, I submitted as part of the packet.
Right, but I mean, it's not available to the, is that, can that page be put up easily?
Is that the last page?
I did call, no, it's actually page 1 of the actual
Yeah, the first
resolution.
page of the resolution.
Oh, okay, well.
But
there's
it's
that.
not in the blue sheet and it's not on the agenda. Oh, there it is. And I can give you a minute. Are you able to see that from that distance? Okay. But this does show good attention to detail. We spent $40 million or $35 million in 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, and we are fine combing this for 60,000, but it does show what's important, which is good. Was there a question on the rate?
No, I'm fine now.
You fine now? All right, thank you. All right, yeah.
I think Chad Farber from Salina. Suffice it to say, $8.50 an hour is not a competitive wage for us. What is the goal of minimum wage or base wage to get our lifeguards up to? You mentioned $12, I think, in Manhattan or somewhere. But I mean, even that's not competitive with
Target.
I mean, Target had the story today of base starting at 15 or 17 an hour, going up to 24 an hour. And it's difficult to get people to work at that wage. Is there a goal of starting wage for the lifeguard, or where are we at in the city?
The full range of a lifeguard role, there's lifeguard 1, 2, and 3. Lifeguard 1 is $8.50 to $9.50. Lifeguard 2, which we consider a head lifeguard, is $9.50 to $10.50. Lifeguard 3 is $10.50 up to, I believe, $12.50 or $12.75. So with the ability to have a fee increase, we can be a little more flexible within that full range of identifying pay rates based on experience, and maybe increasing that starting rate for a brand-new lifeguard within that, at the higher end of that $8.50 to $9.50 range.
And I would add, that range is one of many ranges in our pay plan, which is currently being studied. To look at market factors on all these positions, and then also the relationship between our different positions and pay rates within the organization. So I think we're going to have a detailed conversation and likely a significant cost conversation when we get the pay plan back.
Will that be before the pool opens?
It will be before the budget. It'll be part of the budget process, but we're trying to build this in for this year too.
And I'm assuming most of our lifeguards are either high school upperclassmen or college underclassmen?
Correct.
What's the minimum age? I can't remember.
15.
What is it?
15 years old.
15 for a lifeguard?
Yes. Yes, correct, Mayor.
And they would work-
15 to 19 or so,
And they work how many hours a week? Just
less than 40.
Less than, okay.
40, sometimes there are some of the older people, if they're 18 or older, we do have the opportunity for overtime when needed, especially when we're talking about, do we close a pool or not? We need to open this pool, so overtime, so. But we try to avoid overtime, but sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, I agree. If I was a kid trying to get money together for going to college in the fall, I might be looking for a little higher paying job. But I guess we have time to have that discussion.
Part of it's the environment. My first summer job, coincidentally, was as a lifeguard when I was 16. And it was minimum wage. And to me, that was kind of part of the perk, is I get paid money to sit in the sun around a pool. And it was great. And it honestly was kind of a foundation for the idea of public service, and eventually worked its way into a law enforcement career. But I guess things have changed.
It's not an easy job, being out in the sun for significant periods of time, and so I wish I could find more people like yourself.
It was a fun job. I mean,
We'll let that conversation stop there.
you know,
No, I
Did the same.
agree. Yep. I guess there was less financial pressure on us as young people in
Maybe
those
so.
days. But, all right, well, that's a conversation we can have. Any action to be taken on this resolution?
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 228030.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 22-8030. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
And if I could, since Mr. Hammond is here with some of his staff, and I think maybe this would be better to be handled under other business. I have some questions about our fee schedule for the use of Dean Evans with Kansas Wesleyan and things. So if you have the ability to stick around, I'd appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
All righty, 7.3.
Item 7.3, approve Resolution 22-8027, establishing the rules of procedure and order of business.
This, okay.
Mr. Hennessy.
Sean Hennessy, the Assistant City Manager. At the meeting on February 7th, the Commission brought up the topic of potentially moving the Citizens Forum participation to another area of the agenda. So what I did in preparation for that was to look at our current existing resolution that sets the framework for the agenda and the rules that the Commission applies. That's in Resolution 187580. And in preparation for that, if the commission was interested in moving the Citizens Forum to the end of the meeting, in Resolution 228027, which is in your packet, that would move the Citizens Forum discussion to the end of the agenda in that. Additionally, the city attorney came to me and requested that a clarification be adopted in the rules for rule number 16. And so I will attempt to describe that reasoning, but I'll let the city attorney clarify if I obscure anything. The purpose of the modification of Rule 16 is to make it clear that it's not the equivalent of a motion to reconsider. When you look at Rule 16 that you see in your packet, the reformed rule, what we tried to do was to take the reconsider out of that to make it clear it has no linkage whatsoever to a motion to reconsider, and to make sure that we apply Robert's Rules of Order, which is the rules that the commission operates under. Additionally, there was discussion on the movement of the Citizens Forum to essentially bifurcate it at the last meeting. I did not include that in this original resolution. However, the city manager did prepare a supplemental memo which allows the Citizens Forum to be broken into two distinct parts, which is in that supplemental memo that you have. So in this case, there's no recommendation from staff. The commission is given wide discretion when to set the Citizens Forum and the shape of the agenda. So if you elect to keep 187580, essentially it would stay in the current form. With the new resolution, that would modify it under 228027 to move it at the end. However, again, you have wide discretion to either bifurcate it, to move it to another location if you would like, and so you could amend the resolution as you saw fit.
Questions? Discussion?
Well, I think what the city attorney's given us on rule number 16 is an appropriate clarification.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Could we have city attorney to explain the concern in 16 so that everyone here has a clear understanding of the differences?
Certainly. It was a function, actually, of my preparation for your orientation session that I noted that in Rule 16, there, if you look 3 lines down, where it speaks about what happens, it said at which the item will be reconsidered. Well, if you postpone something to a definite time, you're not reconsidering it, you're just, as it now reads, considering it further. Small point, but particularly with that potential confusion between, as Mr. Hennessy pointed out, you have a process, if it's truly a motion to reconsider, that's an entirely different process. Under 16, we're talking about a case where you would be postponing to a particular time, and presumably that postponement was simply to consider the matter further at that later time, not a reconsideration of the matter. So it was a matter of 2 letters, but the difference between consider and reconsider, but it seemed like if we were anticipating a change, this was the time to, the change on a probably more interesting issue, that this was the time to take care of that. There's also some clarification there on that motion to postpone indefinitely. That language is where we are proposing that it say the effect of the motion to postpone indefinitely is to suppress consideration of the item throughout the current meeting. Consequently, the adoption of the motion to postpone indefinitely is in effect an indirect rejection of the pending main motion relating to the item under consideration. That is virtually verbatim from Robert's rules as to the consequence of a motion to postpone indefinitely. We still advise generally that you not go that way unless there's some just compelling reason. But we thought it best to describe in a little more detail what the consequence is of that type of motion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry, I cut you off there, Bill.
No, that was fine. I mean, the staff kind of added that in there from our conversation, so I just was going to speak to the fact I thought that was appropriate. Opinions we can save for after there's a motion. Maybe we want to go with the public unless there's some questions about this.
Well, I was going to suggest we have public comment and then have further discussion. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Anyone from the public, the audience, like to comment on this issue?
Ben Winholt, Salina. Commissioner Ryan is the one that opened up this, we'll call it a can of worms, as far as the public forum and the citizens being able to address their wants and concerns. During that 3 weeks ago, there were many suggestions brought up, and the one that's on the table today looks like it's at the end of the meeting. Now, Mayor Davis brought up a good point that if you go to the end of the meeting and we go to a 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30 meeting, that a lot of people don't have things to do not want to be here that long. So my suggestion is that you make this open forum for the citizens at 5:30 or around, not before, but a little bit after. Because if you've got something on the books right now that you're doing that you know you can wrap up within 5 to 10 minutes of the 5:30 time, then you can continue and it would be at like 5:40. The thing at the end of the meeting that I have a concern with is people getting off at 5 o'clock. If they know they can be here by 5:30, and anywhere in Salina you can be here in 15 minutes to this place. Basically, if you know at 5:30 your voice is going to be heard, then you're going to make it. But if you have it at the end of the meeting, 2 weeks ago that meeting ended at 4:54. So you had somebody show up at 5:15, it was nobody here. The meeting was over with. So, in my opinion, if you're going to make it at 5:30 and you have a real short agenda for that week, you're going to need to adjourn and then come back at 5:30. Now, everybody knows that you want to get it and wrapped up and be able to get home to your family, you guys included. But the only thing is, you need to figure, you all were elected for the citizens. The citizens, if they have concerns and want to voice them to you, that's why you guys are here. So if you're going to have to stay beyond 5:30, beyond a 5 o'clock wrap-up meeting on short agenda, then so be it. But in my opinion, it needs to be a set time of 5:30 and not at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chad Farber again, Salina. I concur with what Mr. Winholtz was saying. I appreciated the discussion last time, I guess it was 3 weeks ago. If we do push this back to the end of the meeting, you guys know some of these meetings run late. And as far as the citizenry coming and sticking around for hours and hours and hours to make a point, a 3-minute point, is almost a slap in the face. If we did have a set time where the citizens could come and voice their opinion or get something off their chest, and we've heard this over the last several months, the citizens want an input. They want to at least feel like they're being heard. And there is a problem with having the citizens forum at 4 o'clock or 4:05 right when the meeting starts, because there are a lot of citizens who work until 5 o'clock. And sure, they can get on Zoom and watch the meeting, but they're at work and they're not able to have their input in. They send in emails and so forth. But I think this is another opportunity for the commission to say, we want your opinion to be heard. And in that vein, we are going to allow this time to be at a time that is convenient for you, the citizens, to get here and to voice your opinion about that. And I appreciate the 5:30 timeframe. That does give people time to get up here. I understand a lot of business takes place, and if we could stop in the middle of that, perhaps after the next, if you're in the middle of an agenda item and say, as soon as this is finished, we're going to have citizens forum, and if it's 5:40 or if it's 5:44 or what have you, at least people know there is a window where they can come and make their statements to the board. I realize, and I've heard this in the community as well, everybody has an opinion, and opinions are like armpits, I was told many years ago. Most of them stink, and usually just to everybody but you. This is my opinion, but I think this is a way for the commission to hear from the public and to have a set time frame where people are off work and they're able to bring that in. So I do concur with Mr. Winholtz.
Dennis Benoit. I live in Geneseo, but I consider this my hometown. And I've been talking to people about this for a long time, and I think every one of them would agree. So I'll go with the 5:30.
Anyone else? Mr. Wood, anyone online? No? All right. Bring it back up for comments here.
Yeah, I understand the idea of trying to go to 5:30. I think that creates some issues as far as we're at 5 o'clock now, close to being done. Putting it in the middle of the meeting, you kind of lose the flow. I personally believe that, we're up here to conduct the business of the community, and we have individuals that are here because of specific items that are on the agenda. So I guess my comment is, why would they wait any longer than someone from the public to make comments at the end of the meeting? I do believe by moving it to the end of the meeting does allow individuals who want to get off to work to come here and be here at the end of the meeting to make comments that they couldn't make at 4 o'clock. So it's something we can try. You can always change your mind. but I kind of like moving it to the end of the meeting myself.
I would agree with Commissioner Hoppick. I don't see where bifurcating makes things any simpler for us. Do we have the latitude? The chair has the latitude to structure the agenda if there's a worthy circumstance, but otherwise, I think placing at the end of the meeting makes fair to all parties that may attend our meetings. There are consultants here, they're traveling, that are being paid, people that have set items for agendas at specific times. I think they need to be, to have a better understanding of when their time will be to speak. And it does, in fact, put it a little later so the public can be here. So I think I like the version as it is written with the movement to the end of the agenda.
Longback?
I understand where Commissioner Hoppick's coming from, and, but I think I agree with Mr. Farber and Mr. Winholtz that that 5:30 set time would accommodate most citizens. It would be a middle ground for your people getting business taken care of, city staff, whoever. And I think the 5:30 is something we could work with. There's always been conversation that, why don't they have the meetings in the evening when working people can come? Well, that would be partially satisfy that. I agree with the 5:30.
I have a couple comments on it. One, not to muddy the waters further, but what about a hybrid of the two? Like, for instance, longer meetings, we allocate 5:30 or 5:30-ish. Meeting like today presumably may be done before 5:30. Public comments at the end of those shorter meetings. That being said, my 5.5 years on the Planning Commission, public comment was at the end of the meeting, and it was never a point of contention. And I think this might be a case of, this is what we're used to. We're talking about something different, and we don't like it. The knee-jerk reaction is just human nature. Sometimes different's bad, and I don't know. Now that I'm talking out, wouldn't be opposed to doing it at the end of the meeting, maybe for a set amount of time, as maybe a trial run. But I'd also be open to that hybrid I mentioned.
The other thing I notice after being on the commission for 4+ years is when there's an item that individuals want to be here for, they find a way, it seems like, to get here, whether it's 4:15 or 6:30. So, we're not removing the public's ability to comment. We're just moving it to a different time in the meeting. And so,
Well, I think we would be opening the door for more people to participate.
we have that at the end of the meeting also. And we also have emails. I mean, we get, I don't know how many individuals get emails, but we,
At the end of the meeting, we don't know if that's going to be 5:15 or 8:15.
And that is my issue with end of the meeting. I mean, you haven't had a meeting yet to go till 9 o'clock at night, but
Not here.
you will get your opportunity. And it doesn't happen that often, but if there is a hot topic for which 20 people want to speak, and they've sat there and waited from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock, yeah, we have a 3-minute timer, but folks are going to use 3 minutes and 1 second at the least. And I mean, I think it's just unfair. I mean, I think that would stifle one's desire to come speak for 3 minutes, but having to wait 4 hours to do it. I understand the potential value of having it in the middle of the meeting, but for nagling it in a middle of a agenda, if it's moving, I mean, somebody's going to wait no matter how you do it. I just see that logistically being difficult. Now, only because of this issue, is today's meeting on get anywhere close to 5:30. If you remove this, not that I'm predicting what's going to happen to the last issue, but it's just a report for which we don't need to take any action. We've been out of here way before 5 o'clock, and then it's the question, the willingness of folks to hang around for 45 minutes to reconvene. And of course, we would not be taking any action. Well, I guess I'd have to ask the city, would that be a session, that would just be back in open session again?
Yes, Mayor, if there was a gap, if you will, you would want to be sure to recess until you could reconvene. We can't adjourn and then regroup. So that would be all that would need to be addressed procedurally, is to recess and return at the appointed time.
All right. And then the other thing to consider is, a lot of times when we have citizens here, they're not here for citizens' comment. Witness baseball and special assessments, housing developments. They are here to speak on a specific topic. And so you then potentially delay 30 people who want to speak about a tennis project. They are now delayed because you have the citizens forum at 5:30. I don't know how you set a cutoff time to the citizens forum in the middle of the meeting and then easily pick it back up. I mean, no matter who you cut off and have them wait, you're going to be accused of stifling the opinion they wanted to make on that topic. A lot of times this conversation is free-flowing. It's the next speaker's words are influenced by what they just heard. The only thing I don't have a solution for is people who can't get off work. And my wife wanted to come down here one day, and she could not get off to be here. And I said, well, you can get on Zoom. And she thought about doing that. I said, it starts at about 5 or 10 after 4. You can kind of predict when it's going to happen, and you can keep your volume off until it's your turn to speak. So you can keep working. If she has a job where she could do that, if she was standing in front of the public doing stuff, she wouldn't be able to do it. We've talked about starting the meetings at 5 or 6 in the evening. But then I've talked to city managers in my class that took at KU. They start their meetings at 6. Sometimes they leave at 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, which is not great if you have a day job the next day. But I'm worried about stifling. It doesn't give the appearance that we want to hear from folks if we make them wait till the very end of the meeting, in my opinion. But I'll run the meeting either way. It's just a matter of juggling all these sheets of paper here.
In my opinion, the meetings are for us to manage, and we shouldn't manage to the exception. We should manage to the rule. And generally, we're 5 to 6 o'clock here with most orders of business. I think that given that the chair's got some latitude in altering agendas, we should just give this a try on its own merits and see. It certainly doesn't change any of the access that the public has, and it's moving it back a little bit. So those are 2 pluses, in my opinion.
As one session?
That's all in one session. Yeah.
Right, and if it runs 3 hours, it runs 3 hours.
Runs 3 hours, or that I'd like to hope that if we can be more efficient, we can get done before 5 o'clock. So then that 5:30 idea wouldn't work very well. So I just say if it's on the agenda at a appointed time, that 90% of the time it's going to work out right. And if there haven't been very many circumstances with this commission and the business that we do that at least beyond the citizens forum, we haven't been able to estimate pretty much how business is going to go and how much time it's going to take. So I think we'd have an opportunity if that circumstance arose, special item on the agenda that's going to take a lot of explanation, or a topic on citizens forum, everybody would be aware that it was going to be a late meeting before we got there.
Well, I'm going to make a motion, and we'll see where it lands. Mayor Davis, I move we approve resolution number 22-8027 to replace 18-7580.
Second?
Question, so this would be at the end of the meeting, no matter when the meeting ends?
Correct.
So,
Unless the mayor wanted to change the agenda in
So-
that particular meeting.
so the
And have
time of citizens forum then could vary from 4:45 until 8:30 at night.
Possibly.
So, person would not know when to show up. So they would end up having to be here from the beginning of the meeting anyway. Because we've had meetings that end at 4:30. So they would have to not take the chance that we're going to get through our agenda very quickly and miss the opportunity. I mean, I don't know how you
Oh, actually,
get
kind of-
around that.
you sparked kind of a thought, or I guess a question I have, and circling back to Carl's, or, sorry, Mr. Ryan's, or Commissioner Ryan's point. So in theory, if the meeting's going too long, and then the mayor can say, okay, this is obviously going to take longer than normal, and thus open it up to public forum, like say hypothetically at 6 o'clock, or just kind of a little bit more of an adjustment based on each individual meeting. But the fallback would be the end of the meeting? Is that where I'm making the waters muddier again?
Yeah, I think you're still, because you still don't know how long your meeting's going to go, and then I think that muddies it.
Well,
Yeah.
and the other thing that, if a person like we do, we have folks who come for administration, they don't necessarily come to the meeting at 4 o'clock because they know we're not going to be there. We can tell them roughly what time to be here for that issue. Someone trying to time citizens forum is going to have to really be watching the meeting to know.
My concern is it's no different when we have an agenda item, and development's always at the end, and we have individuals from out of town, or we have developers that are sitting here, and if open forum goes for an hour, they're an hour delayed to where they would have been on the agenda also. So we have a motion on the floor, so I'd call it a motion.
And my concern here is we were elected to represent the citizens, not the developers.
We're running the
Those
city
are-
business.
They are citizens as well, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is there's kind of a, if we're not careful, we can get into an us and them type of speak, because these are people who are part of our community, they're investing in our community, and they're taking financial risks in our community, and I don't like the idea that we're putting them kind of in the back seat as well, so it's,
Yeah.
And I don't think we should manage to the exception. We're elected, we're a body that operates in public. We're not a town hall meeting. We're here to do the business of the city. That's what we're elected to do. And it is, we respect citizens and we want to hear from them. We're not taking that away from them. We're just putting it in another place on the agenda. And I think that we will make our meetings more efficient if we make this change.
But no, the rule, though, would be that we don't spend all that much time on citizens forum. I mean, there's some times it goes on for a while, but if we have that many citizens talking about an issue, that's probably something we need to be paying attention to. So my question would be, is your goal are we focusing on when we're going to hear from the citizens, or are we focusing on keeping that from delaying the rest of the agenda? Because those are two different endpoints.
And I think the focus should be on finding a medium ground.
And I think this is an attempt to do that. And we take care of the city's business first, and then we hear from the public.
We have a motion on the floor. Can I call the question?
That would require a vote to suspend further discussion.
Yeah, technically, the motion to call the question requires a second and a two-thirds vote, so I don't know if that's what you were wanting to initiate, Commissioner, but that would be the consequence of calling the
Calling the
question.
question, okay. I will just,
If you were instead just
Second that.
expressing your desire that you move to a
Well,
vote,
I,
that's the distinction.
okay.
And
Then we'll remove
Two-thirds of
that.
5 being 4.
What's that? Okay.
Two-thirds of 5 being 4 out of the 5.
So I guess my question for the fellow commissioners, how much sentiment do you have against having citizens forum at a time so early that some people can't get here? I mean, is that the driving motivation, or is it to keep citizens forum from delaying the rest of the meeting?
I think it's a little of both. Like I said earlier, opening the door to people that are working to get here, but then getting business conducted, hopefully.
Well, as much as I hated the 5:30 idea at first, that would be the only way I could see having a time specific for them. Because we're at its place now, it's a relatively time specific. I mean, it doesn't take that long to say the Pledge of Allegiance, without the risk of them having to sit here until 8 o'clock at night.
I think we need to give this a try. And I think, in my mind, there's a high probability it's all for the best.
Can we modify that motion to include maybe a trial period? Or is that too?
You can make an amendment.
I'd let it stand as it is, and if it's not working out, we can bring it back.
I guess there's not a point of no return. If we do it and it blows up in our face, then we can
We'll change it
adjust
at any time.
accordingly.
I think, and I'll defer to the city attorney on this, but I believe that you certainly do have the possibility of doing it on a temporary basis. Typically, instead of amending the resolution, you just would adopt a new resolution. So if you want to just do a temporary imposition, you would adopt the resolution or modify it as you wish, and then at whichever point you would want to either go back or modify it further, you would just adopt another new resolution. But I'll let the city attorney weigh in that too.
Well, it's a good point, and as we observe you all deliberate, I think both the city manager and I know I am try to be attuned to any time there's a suggestion of an amendment. The less formal approach is, of course, whether or not the original movant and the seconder is willing to allow that amendment. If we have a situation where that is not the case, then of course it is the prerogative of any one of you to make a motion to amend the main motion that is on the floor. That needs to be seconded, but if it is seconded, it is postured to be discussed, and then the amendment would be acted upon. If it prevails, then that becomes then the amended main motion. If it fails, then we're right back to the original motion as it was made. So that would be the prerogative of any of you if you wanted to propose an amendment to the main motion at any point in the discussion.
So, and I hope you know that we generally, if you articulate what you're trying to accomplish, we'll try, by way of amendment, we'll try to help you with that wording. The thing I'm struggling with just a little bit is to Mr. Hennessy's prior point, I don't know that I'm aware of a way to amend the motion to be limited duration. It's probably adopt it as drafted and then instruct us to revisit it at a specified time, or we can take it up as we see fit at a future date.
And that was the point I was trying to make, that rather than including in the resolution a date period for a temporary use for whatever you all decide. It would basically be, you would just instruct us, we're going to do this at this point in time, and then it would come back up again as a topic for the commission at that point in time that you decided for either further amendments or going back to what it was before. And I realize that's kind of obtuse, but it's just something I wanted to try and address.
If you have an alternate approach, I'm all ears, but
No, I understand the point. It's, if I'm understanding correctly, it's the integration of this element in your overall rules of procedure.
Right.
We can't make your overall, that resolution subject to a temporary provision. I understand that point, and it's.
So then we would be able to make after that motion was handled, a separate motion to have this revisited, or comments from the city manager regarding the success or difficulties with the new program, say in 2 or 3 months?
I think it,
Without it being an agenda item for action, but just to have a discussion.
yeah, I think
on
you
the
could
agenda.
instruct us to place discussion of this resolution or these rules of procedure either so far out, date certain. If you give us enough guidance, we'll be sure to, it would be a discussion item. It'd probably be more your discussion than staff's, but I could be sure to place that back on the agenda.
Okay, so Commissioner, did you want to amend the motion on the floor now?
Actually, the more we talk about this, the more I'm okay with letting it stand. And then if it's just something we need to modify, we act accordingly.
Yeah,
Or do we?
You could bring it up in other business at any given
Well,
meeting
and that's
after that.
kind of what I'm thinking is now it feels like we're making it harder than it needs to be, and that at the end of the day, if we make this change and it's causing problems and it's constantly being problematic, it's going to be a point of discussion. And then we probably need to act accordingly.
You
I'm okay with
certainly
letting
could
motions
go that way.
And I come back to the whole planning commission experience, and it was never a point of contention in my 5.5 years of being on the planning commission.
And you had some long meetings.
We did. We had numerous long meetings. So,
Though, were those comments about issues that individual person contemplated having in front of you in the future, or something totally
we'd get
not
random
on the
comments.
agenda? Random comment?
Yeah, oh yeah, we'd get random comments from miscellaneous citizens, and, I mean, it's not as common as here, obviously, but I think there's enough public commentary, and there's enough fluctuation in the length of the meetings that, based on that experience and it not being a problem, I'm willing to give it a shot here.
Okay, and so that everyone understands that you will never go home before 6 o'clock in the evening.
I don't believe that to be true.
I think
Yeah,
we
I
could give
would-
it a shot with a commitment to reevaluate in 60 days.
Okay, so we can make,
Well, I don't agree with 60 days, maybe 6 months or a year, but I think that's up to the discretion of the group at the point that we think we need to do it. And no point to set a target date out there now.
okay, so I'm still unclear, how do you, anyone who wants to make a comment during citizens forum must be here for the entire meeting, practically speaking, because they won't know how short our meeting is going to be.
If I were that person and I were looking at the agenda, I'd make an educated guess, and I'd also watch it on YouTube and then be down here.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is we have social media now, and actually we've gotten more interactive on Facebook and so forth, where it's easier to watch these meetings live. And in theory, a person, if you kind of keep an eye on it and go, okay, well, I'm headed that way now. I mean, there's some flexibility there with technology now that we're having that conversation.
All right.
I'm good.
motion on the floor. Could you repeat the motion? Just, so this is just a motion to, does it have a number? You approve resolution 228027 as, as written. I'm trying to.
And replace Resolution 18-7580.
Yeah.
I believe there's already been a motion and second for that.
It has been, right. So we just, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Motion carries 3-2. Right. And I'll exercise my prerogative to move that we place on the agenda in 6 months, discussion item to review any successes, workflow difficulties we may be having with this. And if there aren't any, it'll be a real short discussion item.
I think you could either act on that motion at this time, or you could bring it up under other business at any future meeting.
I'll forget, which is the reason I'm doing it now. But I mean, if it's not working, I'm sure we'll hear comments from other people. So no second.
Do we need to make a motion?
Yeah, it's your collective prerogative. If you want to take that up at this time,
I'll
take a
make
motion.
a motion that we revisit Resolution 22-8027, establishing the rules and procedures of order of business in 6 months.
Second. And just for clarification, would that be technically revisiting this or just a discussion?
Correct. From staff's perspective, it'd be helpful for you to have a discussion and provide us some direction if you wish to do something different, and then we could prepare an action item if that's the direction that we receive at that time.
All right. Would that wording be acceptable to you? Commissioner Lambert, that we just have a discussion period?
Discussion.
Okay. Any, been moved and seconded, any comments?
Mayor, again, I don't think that's necessary, that's at our discretion, and we don't need to determine the time for that now.
Well, people have complained about our meetings and the order of business for the last 10 years that I've heard of, and it took us 10 years to get to here. That's the reason I
And
want
you
to.
think this is going to change that?
No, if it's working fine, it'll be a 10-second item on the agenda.
One clarification, 6 months is approximately August 22nd, so just for clarity, my suggestion would be, rather than generally saying 6 months, targeting a specific date, and that would be the fourth Monday of the month, and it's not Labor Day, so all indications would be we'd be having a regular meeting on the August 22nd.
Okay. All right. Everyone understand the motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Okay, item 7.4.
Item 7.4, Fire Department Staffing Assessment and Report.
This is City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As I think you recall, in December, we adopted a resolution, kind of the culmination of the review of the admin time that was used by the fire department, and an element of that was a commitment to this particular date to report back on follow-up items that were articulated in that resolution. And so in the staff report that I provided you, I provided a little bit of a summary of what's occurred since that time, and then tried to tackle each one of the topics that were called out in the resolution. So since December, we've conducted a recruitment process for the fire chief position and announced the hiring of Tony Snyder. He has 28 years of experience in the fire service, having retired as the assistant fire chief for the Philadelphia Fire Department. His anticipated start date is mid-March. When I wrote this staff report, he was working on temporary housing arrangements to buy himself some time to work on long-term housing arrangements. I heard secondhand that I think he's got his temporary arrangements made. So we'll be talking in more detail about when he'll be able to be in the community. We're also having ongoing phone conversations with him on a weekly basis just to make him aware of kind of these topics and what's going on and try to plug him in in anticipation of him arriving in Salina. Then also, I think you may be aware that we had some vacancies in the battalion chief position currently, and then we've had a battalion chief announce their pending retirement, so have the need to fill vacant battalion chief positions, and we had internally had conversation about, can we try to run both of those processes rather than wait to fill the chief position, bring the chief on board, and then conduct a battalion chief selection process. So we've run that battalion chief process, and March 8th, I believe it is, that will be the next step in that process in terms of selection panel and interviews. So we're trying to coordinate with the incoming chief as well as Jacob serving in the interim role and run that the rest of that process as it typically would be run. I think later in the report, I did note that one of the questions that came up as related to the battalion chief process was what was the anticipated status of battalion chiefs going forward? Specifically, would they be hourly or salaried employees? I've had for quite some time feedback that question is a deterrent for people applying. Transitioning from an hourly position to a salaried position deters people from seeking advancement to the battalion chief position. This particular time, the indications were all likely candidates had indicated a desire for it to be hourly, for it to be of interest to them. So as I've said, we're in kind of we've run those processes concurrently, and we're synchronizing that as we speak. Then additionally, we brought forward to you a pay plan study, and that was authorized. That the pay plan study's underway with the intention of having that completed and have that information for you as we go into the budget process beginning in April and culminating in August for 2023. I've said many times now, I expect that that's going to be a significant price tag, and there'll be a lot of conversation and a lot of budget effort that will have to go into responding to the pay plan, but it's underway. Then we also implemented or authorized contracting for time and attendance software. That implementation's underway. Quite a bit of behind-the-scenes work that's going to have to be done in terms of programming that, policy decisions across the organization, and then training and implementation. So we're looking at kind of a phased-in implementation. We've got different circumstances for Parks and Rec versus police versus fire versus utilities. We're going to have to sort through all those decisions, and there'll be some universal policy decisions and programming, and then there'll be some specific programming by department. So we'll be trying to move that forward and phase in implementation of time and attendance software. Then, as indicated in December, my intent was to meet with fire command staff, gather more information about the specifics of kind of what was expected of them in the various positions and how that factored into the logic behind the admin time policy that was put in place previously and how that impacted our operations going forward. And my primary interest was kind of trying to get a better understanding of their shift schedule and what they do on their shift schedule, and then what additional expectations kind of came out of that reorganization, and whether those fit into a shift schedule work or not. And so I feel like we had really good conversation. We had a number of conversations, went into great detail by position, and feel like we've had good dialogue between the city manager's office and fire command staff. And so, recapping just a little bit, in 2007, the deputy fire chief position, a recommendation was made to eliminate that position. The thinking at the time was to reallocate that to a combination of a budget, a person that was tasked with budget and computer technology. And I don't know that we got some people on board as related to computer technology, but I don't know that approach ever really played itself out. And then the responsibilities of the deputy chief were to be distributed across the battalion chiefs. So with respect to the 5 topics identified in the resolution that we passed in December, one of those was position descriptions. Just the question of, is the position description appropriate, and should there be changes? And frankly, going back and looking at the battalion chief position description, it still reflects, in my estimation, it still reflects the approach that was in place prior to 2007. And so I provided those typical duties in the staff report, but those are all directed at planning and scheduling a 24-hour shift and leading that shift and policy adherence and leadership, with the exception of that standard caveat of works varied schedule as needed and performs other duties as assigned. And I think that does create some latitude for deviations, but I don't think it creates this expectation of additional responsibilities outside of the scheduled shift. So as I mentioned, it doesn't appear that that position description was amended back in 2007. The other topic that was identified was work assignments, looking specifically at the work assignments, and we focused on fire command staff, 3 battalion chiefs, and then there's some other positions that I discuss in the staff report. So, the bulk of the expectation of battalion chiefs is they are covering a 24-hour shift. They're leading the department during that 24-hour shift. Definitely did find work expectations outside of that typical responsibility that contributed to needing to be available on other days than they are scheduled for their shift, needing to be available either for a block of time or for just incremental different things, whether it's fleet maintenance, the radio system implementation, things like that, that more typically probably would have been at the chief or deputy chief level if we had those positions. Then the other things that got my attention were our EMS chief puts in time above and beyond his shift, fielding calls as it relates to medical officers and individual circumstances, or whether it's a transfer or a treatment, and seems to do that very willingly and feels a great sense of responsibility. But I just want to be, as we look at these going forward, want to be sure that we're not being disproportionate in our expectations of them. I think there's more to be done there. I think the incoming chief really needs to be engaged in that to make a better assessment. But it did get my attention as, we need to be sure that our expectations of our employees are reasonable and appropriate. Similarly, the fire marshal responds to arson calls. Doesn't happen all that often, but when it does, it's all hours of the day and night, both investigation and kind of serves as the PIO, public information officer, on items like that. They also have our arson dog, which is dual certified, and so there's a stipend for care of the dog. What got my attention is the amount of required training that has to happen on a monthly basis to maintain that certification. Once again, I just want to take a deeper look at that to make sure that it's reasonable in terms of expectations and compensation. We had some conversations with the training chief, and for the most part, they're able to coordinate their work schedule to fit around their available schedule, with the exception of they're kind of looked at right now as the first individual to serve as the safety officer on a scene, and so that is a standalone, dedicated individual that's not distracted with other responsibilities. They're overseeing the fire scene and monitoring it for fire safety. Doesn't seem like that happens all that often, and there may be a possibility to delegate those responsibilities across more than just one individual, but that's another topic that I think bears further review by the chief and city manager's office when they arrive. With respect to leave policies, obviously, probably the most, the focal point was, the basis that caused the department to implement the admin leave time that they did, and whether we should consider something along those lines. If we were to do that, the appropriate way to do that would be compensatory time or comp time. There's a way, and our time and attendance software at least has the capability of doing that. Prior to that, we really didn't have a system in place and technology in place to do comp time. As we make that decision, we need to be talking about that across the organization. We may find out that particular job functions have differences, but now that we have time and attendance software and we have the ability to track comp time, that's a policy decision that we need to take up as we do time and attendance implementation. Similar, something that's a little bit more unique to the fire department and is common across departments is what's called shift trading, and the Fair Labor Standards Act makes provision for shift trading, and it's a little bit of an oversimplification on my part, but it's the ability for one firefighter to say, can you cover a shift for me? And they agree to do that, and then they agree to return the favor somewhere out in the future. Fair Labor Standards Act allows for that as long as there's sufficient tracking in place. Again, time and attendance software could could make that a possibility. So though, I think those are things that we certainly need to contemplate going forward. I have had conversation with HR and Deputy City Manager Wood and Fire Command staff about, as the new chief comes in, we need to have a conversation about practices across the board and what's in place, what needs to stay, what needs to be formalized, and if so, how that's formalized by way of policy, time and attendance software program, whatever the case may be. With respect to staffing levels, kind of looked at that in a couple of ways. We've had conversation for quite some time now about the struggle that we have with EMS services, just the increasing call volume historically year over year. Then additionally, our role is providing transfers outside the community to higher care facilities. Those all definitely have value. We did an EMS deployment study. Haven't really dug into that in terms of implementation of those recommendations, and I think that takes further review as well. I think that is very data intensive. Again, our time and attendance software may give us the ability to gather data and track it, analyze it in a way that we can start to try to see what's generating the calls and then what impact that has across the organization in the way of staffing and overtime. We've had a lot of conversation in the fire department for a handful of years, kind of speculating that, well, if we increase our staffing level, we might be able to decrease our overtime. On its face, I think that's probably the case, but it gets very specific in terms of what's causing the need in the first place. Is it vacation leave, sick leave, injury, training, EMS transfers? Just a universal increase in staffing doesn't necessarily very directly equate to a reduction in overtime. Again, that's an analysis that is going to take some concentration and commitment and data that I think is absolutely necessary. But with respect to the battalion chief question, with respect to the admin leave question, I don't think that we didn't identify any staffing level issues that contributed to that particular approach or conversation. And then employee classification is probably the biggest topic, and that, frankly, was whether they should be salaried or hourly. Currently, the battalion chiefs are salaried, and that kind of contributed to the desire for admin time or the provision for admin time. Looking at the responsibilities, if we can focus it back on a more typical battalion chief responsibilities, it's very workable and appropriate for them to be hourly and try to manage their schedules to be that 24-hour shift that they're scheduled for, and then provide overtime as needed. Again, that's going to take some observation and management on the part of the fire chief or fire administration to get a sense of is there anything that's generating overtime outside of that 24-hour shift. But coming out of this conversation, especially in light of kind of that ongoing conversation about a reluctance for people to put their name in for a battalion chief position because of the transition from an hourly to a salaried position, and the recommendation is that we make that transition from hourly to salaried. As far as a fiscal note, it's hard to calculate what the impact of that might be. Obviously, it makes them eligible for overtime. However, the admin leave approach, as we discussed, creates the need for backfill, and so there's some overtime that would have come out of that. And it'll really come down to kind of managing those responsibilities. And essentially, if we went back to this approach and we went to a deputy chief approach, we're essentially going back to the format that we were in 2007. From an organizational standpoint, just trying to position the department in a way that it's likely that they'll have succession, and we'll have some progression from firefighters to captains to battalion chiefs to fire chief. I think this is a significant step forward and something that interfaces with our time and attendance implementation and is an opportunity to kind of better address what the department previously tried to address it through admin time. So then lastly, as it relates to commission action or recommendation, certainly would take your input as to whether you concur or whether you don't. On the assumption that you concur, then we'd bring that back for formal action. And then I did provide a pretty extensive bullet-pointed list of what came out of this conversation for further follow-up. And so I want to take a detailed look at the responsibilities, expectation, and schedule of the fire marshal, the EMS chief, the training chief. I want to take a look at recommendations regarding implementation of comp time and shift trading. Want to dive into EMS call volumes and transfer approach and its impacts on staffing and overtime. That whole conversation that I mentioned about, if we increase staffing levels, could we decrease overtime? We really need a more specific analysis, more strategic analysis of that question, but it certainly has merit. Then reviewing reassignment of selected duties of the battalion chiefs, whether that can go to current staff or whether that should involve reinstating the deputy chief position. While we're trying to keep everything moving as quickly as we could, also trying to be mindful of not making too many of these decisions before the new fire chief is on board and has an opportunity to get acclimated and make some of their assessments and recommendations as well. So I think we've kind of tried to move, I didn't even count, 4 or 5 items all at the same time since December, and we're making progress. Conclusion at the moment is a recommendation to take battalion chiefs from salaried to hourly, with the rest of these items being high priorities for the new incoming fire chief. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Is there a big difference between expected income with overtime versus what our battalion chiefs were being paid salary?
Well,
Because usually
right.
That'd be reason number one to not take a salaried position if I'm going to make less.
Yeah, as we set these rates, and I realize I'm answering the other side of this question possibly, but one of the things we're going to have to be mindful to do is set the rate in such a way that the compensation is kind of the same, that it doesn't represent a decrease in compensation for a battalion chief. But yes, I think the perception in the fire department is a loss of opportunity for overtime when you go, and a heightened expectation of responsibility when you go to the battalion chief position. So we will need to be mindful of how we set those pay rates to account for that.
And except for, say, organizational emergencies, generally speaking, a salaried person doesn't have a need for admin time or comp time because they're salaried knowing there are going to be days when they get to leave early because there's no work to do, and days they're going to stay late because there's more work.
Well, actually, that was a point I forgot to make. A typical salaried employee has the flexibility that you just described. And so, within reason, they worked late. And, in my particular case, I wait for an opening on my calendar, and then I try to take advantage of it. I don't just say, well, regardless of what my workload looks like, I'm out of here today. And I don't do that all that often. Our policy kind of specifies when you can do that. So a typical salaried employee has more schedule flexibility, and they can kind of work it in. A battalion chief is on a hard schedule for a particular day for 24 hours, and so they don't have the opportunity to kind of make that adjustment without it having repercussions across the rest of the organization. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is another kind of justification for this
as long as
approach.
they're not burdened down with meetings and this and that during their 48 hours off, at least.
Right.
If they know ahead of time, well, twice a month you have to come to this, even though you're off.
And that kind of forces the manager, the fire chief in this case, to be more mindful of what it is he's asking outside of that schedule, because it has overtime implications.
Question?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, very intuitive, thank you. In a nutshell, what I'm getting is if it goes to hourly, it's going to incentivize more qualified applicants to apply for those positions.
Yeah, that's one thing. And then just in terms of what's actually expected in equity, it'd be my recommendation that it's a more appropriate approach.
Right. That's of our internal candidates.
Has
it been advertised outside?
We're generally preferring an internal progression, but I don't know that we've done a lateral promotion that I'm aware of, but so the focus would be internal progression.
Question?
The time and the transfers, I was made aware that in 2018, there was an EMS study done, and staffing study. Have we applied any of that?
Not a whole lot of it. That's one of the things that we need to revisit, have the incoming chief take a hard look at it. The recommendations, some of the primary recommendations were trying to pursue a different categorization as extra rural to get more compensation from Medicare, Medicaid, and trying to negotiate an alternate arrangement with the hospital. But there wasn't a lot. We struggled to take the study to a level of detail for implementation. But between the study and then trying to gather more information about what's actually generating our calls and what that does to our staffing, my intention is to take a hard look at that with the new chief.
And are the current chiefs in favor of moving to hourly?
Yeah, in conversation with them, the feedback that we've received is, as I've said before, that's kind of vital to having a good pool of candidates going forward. And, it's, in fairness, we're going to have to set the hourly rate in such a way that it doesn't represent a loss of income on their part. But 2 of the battalion chief position, 2 of the 3 are open right now. Or, well, 1 is open, 1's announced their retirement. So 2 of the 3 will be incoming.
All right, any questions from the public?
Norman Mountain, Salina. We just had a perfect example of a time frame. Could you have condensed your report, Mike? Could you?
I'm sure I could have.
Well, you could discuss it beforehand, or you could make reports and send it to the commissioners.
They have it. They receive a report from each of these agenda items in advance.
I heard a lot more words than what I heard see on that paper.
I'm not going to debate with you, but
Yeah, but you see, you're discussing about time to make it accommodation to the people. Yet we sat here for a half an hour. See what I'm saying?
I thought this was pretty important business that merited being disclosed.
But it could be brought to the commissioners beforehand, and then they could condense it, or you could have it here at the public meeting.
Well, in the city manager's defense, not that he needs me to defend him, but, this is an item which has generated a lot of questions and gossip and innuendo around town, and this is to kind of update everyone in town, where we stand with all the fire department issues, such as they are. It's a lot of detail, but it does explain where we are. And the next time it comes up, it may actually be in a very short 5-minute presentation with action being taken. But this sets the stage. Any other comments?
Chad Farber, I may have missed it. When is the new chief scheduled to begin?
Well, mid-March is kind of what we've agreed. We haven't picked a hard date because he's trying to figure out housing.
Okay.
All right, that was a report to be received, and we are now at other business.
Yeah, I did have some questions for the Parks and Rec staff concerning the Dean Evans usage and some of this came about when Kansas Wesleyan removed snow and we had the pellet issue and stuff. But I guess my question is, as we look at a cost recovery, I don't believe I've ever seen a fee schedule, and that's what brought it up under the other deal, a fee schedule for what Kansas Wesleyan's being charged to use the field for practice and also for games. And are those dollars being set aside for turf replacement?
To answer your question, the control of the facility is in the city's hands. However, with the Berkeley Family Recreational Committee, they set up a tier system for fees based on the priority of use from the agreement. Baseball Enterprises, so let me back up a second. So the base rates of fees per game, $150, per hour of practice, $50, per date for tournament, $1,000. From that base rate, based on the agreement that was executed, Baseball Enterprises would pay 50% of those fees. USD 305 would pay 50% of those fees. Kansas Wesleyan would pay 75% of those fees. And any other outside group outside of those Baseball Enterprises, USD 305 or Kansas Wesleyan would pay 100% of those fees.
And that's in recognition of their donorship level for the fundraising to fund the project in the first place? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So for Kansas Wesleyan, which that would mean that 75% for two 7-inning games would be $225. A 1 9-inning game would be $113. 2-hour practice would be $75. And a tournament per day would be $750.
Who monitors that?
We have a gentleman who is stationed at Berkeley Family Recreational Area.
Okay.
And we also have, and he has access to our scheduling software, and every practice, game, tournament is scheduled through that software, and he has access to that software. And he is verifying that is what is happening at Dean Evans, in addition to all of Berkeley.
Is he scheduled out there 12 months out of the year, or what's his?
Monday through Friday right now. In the summer, Travis probably can answer it better than I, but I'm sure there's quite a bit of flexibility based on when games need to be, our fields need to be readied for games and practice.
Yeah, I guess I just have a concern. I know that Kansas Wesleyan has, I think, 80 players on their roster now, and that's probably twice what the high schools have. And based on the scheduling I looked, they're probably using the fields 60% of the time. So I'm just going to go on record saying I don't think they're paying enough. I think that our cost recovery with Kansas Wesleyan, we're going to have turf to replace, and not have the funds to do it. I also I understood that Wesleyan's opponents are allowed to use steel cleats. Is that true this year? I know it was last year.
Did you say Wesleyan or their opponent?
Their opponents.
You might speak to that as well as...
Because I believe we even had to replace a pitcher's mound last year.
Well, I was going to add, you might speak to that as well as turf replacement, how that's being approached.
Travis Shaley, Recreation Superintendent. Yes, they did apply for an exemption this year, as they did last year, for their allowing them to wear steel cleats for their games. That includes their opponents. We came to, I think it was November, December this year, and evaluated the field, and just the pitching mound needed to be replaced, and they picked up that tab. They did purchase that. And then we have an annual maintenance built into Dean Evans, and then we perform that as well.
And then I'd add one other thing. The agreement that we entered into to kind of fund and authorize the construction of the improvements to Dean Evans provided for the committee that Mr. Hammond mentioned, and also provided some overarching language about the intent of cost recovery for fees. And so what we need to be doing on an annual basis is looking at the activity level that we've got, what fees are being generated, and then comparing that to our expenses to then make adjustments to fees. And so this committee that's called out in the agreement is the one that's being looked to do that.
So do we put those funds aside? I mean, do we have an account set aside for turf replacement?
Yeah, I believe so. And Debbie Pack is not here. We've got a couple things going on. We've got some fees to cover just ongoing costs, and then
Right.
yes, we've identified a city contribution, annual contribution, as well as then trying to capture that additional increment for turf replacement.
Because we are paid that rent it's paid to the city, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Are the different entities billed on a monthly basis, or how do you recover the money?
Seasonal. We keep track of every use based on practice, whether it's a game or tournament, that type of thing. We can, but it's mainly seasonal. There's a lot of changes when it comes to weather practices or games. And so when we make those refunds, changes, that type of thing, the computer keeps track of it. And then right at the end of the season, then we got a final number and they pay it.
I'm just curious, were the steel cleats anticipated for that field when it was?
I think it's always been
It's definitely been a topic
a topic of discussion. That is correct. Some fields allow it and some do not. So it's just, again, turf is new to us. And so we came up with an exemption form. They properly filled it out. It was voted to allow them to wear them during games only, not practices, but during their games.
In the baseline, is that real dirt or just something that looks like dirt?
It's like a granule. It's a black shredded tire is what it is, grounded up. And,
Even on the base, get down the first base and third baseline, where the runners.
It's within the turf, yeah. It helps keep the turf up.
yeah, everything you see inside those fences, it has a granule.
It's 100% turf, then within the turf are these rubber pellets that.
Right, but on the baseline.
There's no dirt.
Is it?
Yeah, it's all turf. It's
that's
brown
no
turf,
dirt
but
even
it's.
along
It's
the-
brown turf,
Okay.
green
and-
turf. You can paint it whatever color you want.
So Commissioner Hoppick made mention to the snow plowing, and for everyone's benefit, and you might speak to kind of that conversation that went on in advance. The committee decided to give it a try and.
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't like it was just done, and they did ask permission, and we say, hey, we'll give it a try, you know. So
You might describe what it is.
yeah. So the Coach Neal did have some experience doing this at a previous job he was at, and so they asked the committee, can we remove the snow? And the committee felt like, well, we'll give it a try, and it was with some provisions, though. It was no metal blade, you know, plastic, no heavy equipment on the field. There was definitely some things that we're not going to do, and if I remember right, the snow was a lot of blowing going on, and it was up against more of the fences, and by the time they started performing, a lot of it started melting in the middle, but there was a lot of snow towards the fence lines, and they did scoop it with plastic shovels and put it on a gator and hold it off. So that was kind of the process with that.
And we ended up with pellets in that.
We did have some pellets. That is correct. We had some pellets laying out on the concrete, and by the time the snow melted, it was a lot less than I thought originally.
So did the players do that?
They did.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, any more business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. And we do have a meeting next, yeah, the 7th, okay.